Welcome to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. Jimmy is a veteran U.S. Navy SEAL, a former protective officer for the CIA Global Response Staff, founder and CEO of the Able Shepherd Program, a husband and father of 4, and a personal friend of mine. Now here's Jimmy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. I'm your host, Jimmy Graham. Today in the studio, well, as always, we have Able Shepherd 051 BK in the house. What's up, brother? Doing good? Awesome. And we are just very pleased to have Tyler Weinischke, my good friend, also in the Able Shepherd program, phase 2 currently, right?
Correct.
And we're going to call this one, BK, the book. The name has changed many times, right? So we'll talk about a working title and where it's come from, where it's going, what I'm trying to capture. But in our many conversations we've talked about, I was like, man, we've had great conversations. We're trying to capture them in the written text. And I'm like, this experience must be excruciating trying to write a book with Jimmy Graham. So I was like, we should sit down. We always say that'd make a good episode. So before we get into that, guys, I just wanted to give a shout out to Neil Pinkham. This episode is brought to you by Able Nation. That's able-nation.org. If you are in charge of your church or your security civic group, any kind of security protecting people, taking care of one another is what we call it. And you could use some financial assistance in the form of medical gear, in the form of scholarships for quality training for individuals that you're going to put in that role. There's a responsible way to do it. And if you need a little help with your budget, Able Nation can help. So contact Neil at able-nation.org. Blessings, my brother. All right, let's get to it. I got a little bit of a residual coming off of the crud. Got the Wuhan going on. Everybody's like, eek, put a mask on that man. I've got kids, which means I've got a cough like all the time. But we'll get through it. Brother, let's just get off into it. What are we kind of doing in your, I know what I'm trying to do, but how do you see this and at this particular time, trying to capture some of the many things? We'll get into the particulars, but why does the moment right now need what we're doing? What are we doing, and why do we need this now?
Oh, man, that is a long-winded question. I think when we've talked about it a lot, what first comes to mind is the idea of what is a man.
Yeah.
In the book, we have a working chapter right now, a man's man 2.0.
Yeah.
And you look at the Urban Dictionary's definition of a man's man, it's a Chris Hemsworth, real nice around the edges. He's nice to look at. He's a gentleman. He's also got some quirks about him. But the definition of a man's man in the world's eyes is constantly changing. Yep. It's like the Wikipedia definition. It's something that anybody can add to or take away at any point in time. And the problem we face these days is the fact that as a man, as any sort of leader, we have no parameters to lead within. Yeah. We have been stripped of the boundaries. We've been stripped of what we are allowed to do, and then also reprimanded for when we aren't leading. And it's interesting, in another section of the book, we talk about this idea of, are we leading while being seated? Are we leading while sitting at the table or yelling at the TV? And I think those images truly capture what a man's man is in this world's eyes, and the idea of, as a man, we are expected to lead, but then we are expected to follow the rules. Yeah. Neither of which are clear.
We've talked about this before. Everybody wants someone, I'll say a man right now, everyone wants a man to stand until he does. Yep. And then it makes people uncomfortable, and they're like, hey, cool it, man. Yep. I didn't mean that, sit back down, right? I don't mean inappropriate standing up. I mean just standing up and having difficult conversations and saying, I'm not asking you, this is what I stand for. And people go, ooh, eek, you can't say that, right? Yeah. And I absolutely disagree. So I apologize. I want to introduce you a little bit more. Tyler, like so many people, BK, what's up? So many people in this program, they see a need, and I can't even express the gratitude for guys like you that say, I've said it this way, when you're an entrepreneur and you're barely treading water and you're to here, and somebody puts a book on your head and goes, you should read this. Or they go, you should do this, and they give you more work, right? Yep. And you're like, really, I'm barely making it. Or they say, there's an obvious need, let me take care of that for you. Yeah. My staff right now, I'll look over and go to do something. They go, I already took care of that. I'm like, that is just, it's the best gift you can give somebody that's barely treading water, right? Because then you're able to come up an inch, So you happen to see, we're struggling, trying. I've had much help with this, but we got to find something that's streamlined that's actually going to get done. Yeah. And I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this. You have. You've come alongside a pastor, at least one, workbook, devotional. Yeah. Book, workbook, devotional, right? Yep. And it took thoughts from somebody who I don't know him, but I'm guessing it's just, 100 miles an hour, sensory overload, open up his receptors and all this information came in. And then something led by God needed to come out.
Yeah.
But I'm not organized, and you can speak to that. Once I say it, it's gone forever, right? Sorry. I'll get it, and then I'll come back, and it's in pieces everywhere, and it's never going to be a book, right? Yeah. So we have to. I want to talk about the technology we've used. We've kind of. I'm not even going to write a book. I'm going to speak a book, and then it's going to be captured, and then it's going to be transcribed by an app, and then you're going to take it and massage together. This has happened many, many times, but I underestimated, thinking maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Well, we're past the year mark. I believe I am. So getting into that, and there's so much more. Like you've said, at some point you got to hit enter.
Yes.
Like you can't write a book about everything.
No.
But I'm living life, and every day I'm like, oh, that needs to go in the book. So now we've got a working model of the way that I see this is a subject. We call them subchapter. I call them talking points. This is how my mind works. I'll get to a point that's significant that I feel is a spirit-led point, and I'll make it. And then editors say, stretch that out, make that a chapter. And I'm like, no, that's over. Let's move on, right? Yes. But then it's very sporadic. It's been solid point, solid point, solid point. But that's how my mind works. I enjoy. You just said you get to a book like that, and you're like, hey man, I knocked out 10 talking points, but it was only one chapter tonight, right?
Exactly.
And there's stopping points in there. And I love going in there, and if I need to pause and think about it, I'll just set the book down, right? Or I'll pull out my Bible or whatever. But sometimes it gets going too long, and then it loses my attention. And I know that's me. I truly believe there's more people out there like that would enjoy a book. I've seen a couple that I've read that are broken down like that, and I just appreciate it almost without appreciating it until we started talking. So there's so many points. Finding what you and I'm not writing and you say at some point just write another book, right? But I do want to put best foot forward, and I thought it'd be like, get this out, get it on paper, and hit send. And I just can't do it, because if it doesn't sound like me, or if it's not what I was trying to say on that first, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but there's some books that I've read that are, this was a spirit-led book, and it punched me right in the soul. Then the follow-up wasn't, and it was good. It just wasn't that. It was like, this guy wrote from the heart, and he poured everything out, right? He didn't cover the whole world, but everything he wrote was amazing. And I'm in. And then the second one it was almost like your editor needed another book. You know what I mean? And we'll deal with that when we get there, right? But I want this one to be just genuine. So what say you about that, the structure and anything that we've used to actually start getting words on paper?
Man, I think this whole journey, so back it up a little bit. When we wrote, when I helped my former pastor write the first book, it was 65-70% of the way there. I just kind of helped push it over the finish line. And to your point, he wrestled the same deal of it came out right before COVID, and just the elections and all of that coming up. That was all. I want to include this in the book. I want to include this in the book. And eventually, it's kind of like, are you writing about something you're passionate about, or are you just trying to include present day times to sell it on a bookshelf? And so once you release that book, the workbook, as we've talked about before, kind of comes out second nature, comes out easily, because the fact I'm just going through the book and I'm copying and pasting what we've already discussed, summarizing it down to where if I'm sitting there reading this book hand in hand with the workbook, I'm just summarizing the chapter, asking a couple questions for me to really think about, and then journal about that and move on. And in this process, when we started the process of writing the book, I think the first manuscript was out pretty quick. I would say July, August, we're like, hey, we've got a working manuscript, we've got something on paper. And then that was when you start finessing it. And like you're saying, there's so much about what you're passionate about that it's not necessarily about writing our book, but figuring out how do we take all of these things which have a very common thread, which is just ingrained in Able Shepherd and as you as CEO. But how do we take this common thread and weave it through the book and make it to where it's not a trilogy, but a book you can pick up off the shelf, and it accomplishes the vision and mission for this first book. But also, like you're saying, to where when somebody reads this, it's not a bunch of words on paper, but it's something they actually understand and want to apply. And there's several chapters throughout the book that we've worked on where it is this idea of knowledge and wisdom. We don't want the book just to be a bunch of knowledge. What you talk about in the book about this story in Tripoli, where all these guys sitting around a table talking about lots of things, and there's lots of knowledge being thrown out, but there's no wisdom in the room. That exact premise in the book is we don't want the book just to be a book filled with knowledge, but a book that actually takes knowledge and applies it into a man's life, or whoever the reader is, and makes it wisdom.
I think, I said this again today on an interview that I was just having earlier, is that I found out somewhere along the way that I'm absolutely addicted to adding value to other people. And that's what my goal for this book, as you know, it's never intended to be a Navy SEAL book. It was never intended to be a look at me book, but to add wisdom. When I'm thinking about it to my children, particularly my son, then I realized quickly this isn't for kids, not primarily just for kids, because there's 60-year-old men that say, can you teach me how to speak to another grown man, right? And my answer is, how about we figure it out together? Because nobody teaches what I call mid-level confrontation. You know much about this. Is I could turn away and pretend I wasn't insulted. I can turn away and pretend I didn't see somebody get assaulted. I could turn away and do whatever. Then that'll manifest later, and I feel like a coward. Or I can go overboard and just crack the dude in the face. And you didn't know, thankfully, none of you knew, younger Jimmy Graham, where I had zero problem with that, right? Like, all right, we doing this? And it was really, but it came from not a healthy place, right? But it was that thing saying, I'm not going to be a coward, so I would overdo it. And now it's like, you're going to end up in jail? Like, is that really what we're doing here? You know? But the middle part, me and my buddy Gary call it mid-level confrontation. We're not taught that. We don't get taught that piece. That, I think, there's so many answers in that. So we're going to delve into that. And that's what what do you foresee this book being? Because that's my attempt, and I'm still figuring it out, by the way, is to be, yes, I'm going to be honest about some Navy SEAL stories. I might talk about buds. I might not. That chapter I talked to you about where it says, basic underwater demo and SEAL training. And then that's going to say cold, turn the page wet, turn the page miserable. The end. Go read somebody else's book, right? You've all heard about that. I'm not trying to milk this thing out. I'm trying to say, genuinely, Jimmy Graham, there's stories that I think are my stories, right? I was going to push John Eldridge's book and get behind that and launch it and all that stuff, which I still push, by the way, tell everybody should read it. But when I went to do that kind of campaign, in prayer, I felt like I was saying, that was his story and it's amazing. Tell yours. Right? You're your own guy. Tell your story. Because I'm an absolute, I tell people this, I'm the world's leading expert on Jimmy Graham. Not much else, by the way, but I know more about anybody in the world about Jimmy Graham than anybody, right? So telling that, and man, I appreciate those lessons, and I really wouldn't change anything. There's been horrible stuff that's happened in my life, and I wouldn't change it. So that comes out in the book of saying, I needed to be humbled and work with my hands and do all this stuff with all these accolades as Navy SEAL, CIA, all this other stuff. But I went back to making next to nothing, doing dirty jobs, and I needed it. I just needed it. And I didn't know where that was going, but now I get it, right? So if we look back on that, trying to capture that, trying to say, if there's anything here that can help you, please do so, right? Please take anything here if it can help you avoid a pitfall that maybe I fell into for a while. Is that, what do you see this thing? Yeah,
man, I think, simply put, I see it as a guardrail. I think you nailed it on the head, and even just in the time working with you on this book is, you said earlier you love to add value to people. And what I've seen across this book, it's never been using the accolades of a SEAL or GRS or any of these things that we've seen over and over people use to market themselves. It has been genuinely, here's what I've learned, take it or leave it. And what I foresee, and I believe this book is going to be, is one of those books that, should the reader actually choose to put the time in to read it, they'll understand it's not another man saying, I have the answers. It's not another SEAL or anybody saying, here's the ways we solve the problems at hand. It's somebody saying, here's what I've learned. Take it or leave it. And one of the sections of the book you talk about, in an interview, you're asking a question, what do you know now that you wish you would have known then? And you had a smart aleck response, and I remember exactly what it was, but then you thought about that question and said, actually nothing.
They said, what would you change? And I said, all of it. And then we kind of laughed. What do you, now that you know all this, what would you have changed had you known it? And I said, all of it. And then I said, I actually none of it. I'd change nothing.
And I think that speaks to this idea of, I think in a day and age where we have more information than we know what to do with. And really, the answer to any problem you have is at your fingertips. Everybody's looking for a quick fix. And what I see in this book isn't a quick fix, but a start to a journey. We talk about very early in the book this idea of adventure is at the heart of every man. And I think this book is the start of that adventure. It's what you probably have felt on the rise of the BDR of, you start the adventure, there's excitement, there's this gung-ho, there's this almost grit of I need to change something, I'm not sure where to start. And this book is almost offering, here's a starting point. It's not going to take you to the finish line, but here's something to get you going in the right direction. And I think anybody who is willing to actually read between the lines and hear the stories and see beyond, I mean, even your second subchapter is Another Steel Writes a Book.
Yeah.
And understand it's not this tactical book. If you're going to purchase the book, it's not this idea of, I'm going to get all of the Able Shepherd course in the matter of 300 pages, or I'm going to take away everything I know from Jimmy Graham. This is very much, here's my story. And you say it very well in the chapter on Jimmy. Mm-hmm. Is in Scripture. You have all of these chapters of men, and you're working, and God is working in your heart on the chapter of Jimmy Graham, and it's still a process. And you're just allowing people to have a sneak peek into that and saying, here's the tools.
Yeah.
You choose to do with them.
And I think when people understand that there is a book, there's a book. It's not canonized in paper form for us to look at, but there is a book of Tyler Weinischke that's being written right now. It changes everything. And I talk about when I understood that in my 30s, by the way. In my 30s, really? Going to church like your whole life, and in your 30s you realize not only is this a true story, but I'm in it and it's an action adventure. Yeah. If guys realize that, everything changes that day. Because it did for me, right? I'm like, this chapter's not going to suck, right? This is going to be the best, all of a sudden you're like this, you were born into a world at war, all this stuff. Yeah. And are you a spectator? Or are you in it? Are you the son of a king? Are you that guy in the movie? I know we talk about the Commodus or Maximus kind of thing. You see a world saying, no, you're really Maximus. I know you. And it's like, sometimes I'm like, no, you're not. You're actually Commodus, right? You need to get your act together. So it's like, I've got a word for you. And when people hear that, they hear the Jimmy Graham, Navy SEAL, all that stuff, their word is always this glorious, But then the guy, Bill, gets it too. And I'm like, wait a minute. Hold on a second, Sometimes you just got to be honest and say, no, actually right now in your life, I got a word for you. You're Commodus, right? And, and you get it together. I've never heard that.
No.
Right? And at some point when you're not genuine, I think guys can sniff that out. Yep. Ladies too, but it just means you're like, you know what? This is the same hocus pocus that's got us in this mess. And it's time to start challenging and checking, grown men and tell them the truth. Yeah. And not as I've got this figured out. This is what a man is. It simply means there was a thing I was pursuing at 25 years old, 28 years old. Yeah. It's totally different at 48. Like that, there was a lot of waste of time and this lie that I was pursuing, and it was absolutely not healthy. Yeah. Right. And now I look at it and I go, man, I hope my son doesn't go down that road. Right. Or at least be able to recognize it for what it is, because it's more efficient. If somebody would have spoke in and said, we've talked about having that. Who is that example of a Christian man? Mm-hmm. And this just came up in my family. It's like some of these examples, they just didn't fare well now, and they said Jesus a lot, but there was nothing calling me to be like that. Absolutely. You know what I mean? So it had the opposite effect. Yep. If you've ever seen somebody that betrayed that position of son of God, like you are a son of God, you're an heir to the throne, you are a co-king of this nation kind of thing, then they betray it. It doesn't help the kingdom. No. It actually pushed me away for many, many years. I'm like, you guys are a bunch of hypocrites. And I'm out. And you're lame, and I don't even want to be around you because you're freaking weird, right? So then I'm out. But then God's like, hey, I'm not done with you yet. But I needed to see it, by the way. And now he's calling me back and saying, hey, that whole send me from Isaiah 6:8, I'm feeling it in my bones, man. I say that there's a war coming. There's something coming that's big. And every day, if you talk about Esther, if you don't step into this, God will use somebody else. He doesn't need you. No. He doesn't need Jimmy for anything. But there's so much honor if he calls me and I answer, and if I don't do it, he'll use somebody else, right? And then I've missed it, right? Yeah. So to be that person that says I am born. Oh yeah, so many guys I know. I was born 100 years too late, and I'm supposed to be a cowboy. You're supposed to be exactly right here. And by the way, what the lack of things you're doing means if you were a cowboy, you'd be that other guy. You'd be the guy with the hoe, showing up and going, yeah, they say get out of town. It's like, brother, whatever. Yes. It just means you're not going to be that person because you're not that now. No. And it was so much harder back then. Yes. So anyways, I see this rise of people that are stepping up, but they're like, again, I want to do something. I don't know what to do. And I say, well, the answer is something. Do something, right? So do something while you're thinking about it. And Krista, one of the ladies on our Monday nights, probably on tonight, is she was, what did she say? Oh, I'm gonna wait on God. And she goes, her pastor said, wait on God. But hustle while you're waiting on God, right? Don't just sit cross-legged on the floor and say, okay, God, someday and then 5 years later, you're still sitting there. It's like, now get moving, open those doors, build those relationships, and then follow your heart. And if more people did that and were committed to actually do the work, like, God, fill my cup. By the way, give me a cup. It's like, no, get a cup, man, and then show up and let him fill it, right? And I get it. Some people are in a phase of their life where they just cannot even get a cup, right? Or make a cup or do whatever, and I get that. But most aren't. No. Most people, it's at their fingertips. The answer is always right here in these boots, but they're saying we should elect someone to fix all this. Yeah. It's like, no, you said you like bottom up, not top down. You said you like we the people, not you the government. Yeah. You're up. They go, wait a minute, I didn't say all that. No, you did actually. Yeah. But that everything you said means it starts with you right now. Go. Do more for your church and your school and your kids and all that stuff. Maybe do with a little less, but pour more into your kids. And people are like, I didn't sign up for all that. No, you did, actually.
Well, I think too often people say, I'm waiting on God. I'm waiting on something as a cop-out.
It is.
Because they're afraid that actually if they take a step and fail, then they failed completely. They can't get back up on their feet. Yeah. And I think we started the whole conversation of this idea of a man standing up to lead and people saying, no, don't do that. Yeah. Sit back down. Well, the whole point of the problem we're at is people don't have the liberty or the permission to say, you know what, I'm going to take a stand, whether it's right or wrong. Yeah, absolutely. It's easier to keep an object moving once it started moving, but if they're just going to sit there, then let's just move on to the next person. Yeah, I know. We've talked many times. We're like, yes, and we're like writing and we get all fired up and everything. It's actually funny. It's a lot of fun. Your version, I think we're in alignment with pretty much everything that's been written down, but Man's Man 2.0, that kind of came to me. I was like, hey, I'm not willing to throw that term out, Man's Man, because it's a derogatory term. Oh, he's kind of a man's man, so don't listen to him. Yeah. A lot of these books start with, hey, I'm not a man's man. I actually play the cello or whatever it ends up being. And I'm like, that's your credit is you're not a man's man. Yeah. So their credibility starts off with, I actually cry a bunch and I write poetry. I'm like, whatever. Yeah. I say strength, not weakness. I care less about any of that stuff. It has very little, or it's jujitsu, or it's Navy SEAL or whatever. Some of the greatest men I've known in my life knew none of that. They didn't do jujitsu, and they weren't a Navy SEAL, and they weren't whatever. And then I think about the amazing Navy SEALs that I know weren't well-rounded men. Mm-hmm. I've said it this way. I've been through those echelons that the world considers these very high elite man's man kind of things. And you know what I found along the way? Broken men. Yep. All the way up. As high as you can go, broken men. Yeah. So it's just an illusion that doesn't exist, but the man's man, and I think I know where you're standing on it, but what is your version of that? What's your kind of like breakdown of what we're trying to say there? I think to your point, the first thing that comes to mind is your perception is your reality. Yeah. So I think to your point, I'm sure when you look back your days in the SEAL teams, your perception of what you thought a man's man was some men standing around you in the locker room. Yeah. It wasn't until later in life where hindsight's 20/20, you look back and said, wait a minute, the men in the locker room were still kids. They were still the boys that I grew up with on the playground. They just looked good. They knew how to play the role. They knew how to play the act, but they didn't actually know what a man's man was. I think in today's world, my version of a man's man, looking at this book, and you're right, I think we're dead on the money. We share that same vision is somebody who is willing to lead. And that doesn't mean leading from the front. For myself, I've had the opportunity to lead from the front, but I find so much more joy in sitting in the back and pulling the strings behind the curtains and letting somebody else get all the glory, but being able to put in the work behind the scenes. Yeah. Being a father, a man's man is showing that my priorities are where my words lie, that my words aren't empty, that my words aren't just, oh yeah, I'll be there Friday night, babe, for the presentation, or I'll be there to have family time, and then being 30 minutes late. Yeah. When she sees me and knows that me showing up to work late eats my lunch. Me showing up to anything 5 minutes late eats my lunch, but I'm more than okay to show up to my house 5 minutes after I told her to be there. Yeah. I think to your point, it's hard for me to say, here's my definition of a man's man, but I can have men that I look at and say that's a quality or an attribute of a man's man. That's something that I'm aspiring for. I don't think there is a clean-cut definition. Sure. But I think that there are qualities at which I look at. Even when I think about Green Pen First, one of the sub-chapters we're working on, of this idea of you're sitting in your office and you're writing your year calendar and your wife walks in and says, I really hope we're not the green pen.
Because there's not much ink on the board, right? Yeah, that's as honest as it gets right there.
And then you realize, like, moving forward, that's not going to happen. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's hard, that definition of a man. Yes. We started going on that road, and I'm like, man, this is elusive, and it's going to come across wrong and all that kind of stuff. But I will say this, is if I truly think about, and we talk about this, if you truly think about the greatest men in your life, he's like, if I asked you, hey, man, have you ever met like a real man? And then I said, don't answer me. I want you to think about that for 5 days. Yeah. If you truly go deeper and deeper and deeper, I would be willing to bet, because I know you, and I think a mature man, if you said, okay, this is the person and this is why, you would probably start writing down the attributes of Christ. Because that's where I landed, right? Yep. And it wasn't the toughest guy I knew, and it wasn't the killer, and it wasn't the this, and it wasn't the that, I'd start going on that road. I'm like, I'm gonna take that person off, right? Because they don't rank that, And really, when I was thinking about it, what came up to me was I was like, man, it's just amazing, and I didn't expect this at all. Yeah. There's a movie called The Drop Box, and there's a Chinese dude that rescues babies.
Okay.
Put a box in the side of his house and said, if you're gonna kill your babies, put them here. I'll take care of them. He's got 20 babies, right? And he's got to find a home. He's like, I don't know, God will figure it out. And I'm like, man, that if you really think about his whole life, is you talk about dying to self to save babies, guy's on the list, man.
Yes.
I don't know that the karate guy is going to outrank him. You know what I mean? I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Rex Kwon Do is not going to outrank this dude.
Yes.
So it's just a whole different perspective if you're talking about a mature man putting your name on a list you wrote, right? So I think that that's a big deal. And we've said, out of strength, not weakness.
Yeah.
And I think it was a Jordan Peterson interview that does this beautifully well when he was talking about, they said, well, strength and dangerous. Like, I want my son to be dangerous under voluntary self-control and be formidable, right? Which means watch where you step around this guy. Me, myself as well. Here's the boundaries. You don't talk to me like that. Yeah. And not because I'm going to beat you up, because I can't be here anymore. If you're going to act like that, I'm out. And I'm kind of a nice guy. I think you'd like being around me if you could act right? But maybe you missed out on that, and so did I, by the way, because I'm not in charge of you. I'm in charge of B, and now I can't be here. That's unfortunate, because you can't speak like an adult, right? So that's just a big deal to me, and I think that, he says also, when men are formidable, in particular men, and you can understand that left and right boundary, he says everybody knows to watch their step. There's just rules. There's certain things, and then that leads to decency. We've lost that. Absolutely. I don't care which president you're talking about. Decency's gone, and my kids leave the room. I'm like, hey guys, can you beat it? Because the president's coming on. It's not okay. It's not okay. We must find a way back from that, and it's not going to come from somebody who doesn't understand decency.
No, and I think to that point, I think just listening to you talk, what defines good, what defines a man's man is whatever we put on our highlight reel. Right. Whatever's on Instagram. You brought up when the president comes on TV, you got to tell your kids to leave the room.
Yeah.
Well, because the man you see on the TV is what sells to the world. Yeah. And we're just even going back, I think what I've admired so much is this desire to stay as far away from it being another SEAL book. Yeah. Because as you've said over and over is, SEALs will get them in the door. It'll market really well, but when they sit in this room for 5 minutes and they hear me talk, if there's nothing of value, then I might as well open the door for them as they walk back out. Yeah, because there's no point in you being here. Yeah. When you think about even hearing you just talk about man's man, what comes to mind is that this world has defined a man's man as attributes and accolades, as something that only doesn't surpass time. Yeah. Even if you're the world's biggest bodybuilder, eventually there comes a time where your body says, you can't do this anymore. So what's left of you?
Your entire identity's gone.
Exactly.
I told a buddy this when he was tied up in some lies and all that stuff, and we're really good friends now, but it hurt the relationship for a minute. Wouldn't change it, but it went like this. If I reach over and pull that trident off your chest, what's left? Because empty shell of a man is not good. It's not a good answer, right? So if your identity is in that and you lose it, it's not okay. Yeah. Now, if there's much, much more and you're wearing that trident, you bring so much to the community. You're not drawn from it, right? Yes. So I think that many people put their identity into shooting a gun, their identity into being a cop, their identity into being a Navy SEAL. It was never made that way. No. And that, we talk about honor and glory. Glory's not ours. It's not ours. You must give it back to God. And if you don't, it'll eat your lunch. How many child stars are train wrecks because they affixed to glory? Yes. Now, the beauty of that is when you do something honorable and you hand that glory to God, some of that honor is yours to keep. It sticks to your skin, right? And then you multiply that times how many years, you become an honorable, respectable person. Yeah. You can't buy that. When the sky is falling, you can't buy respect. Yeah. You go to the people you respect and say, can you help me? And they say, absolutely. Yep. So that's such a big thing that we need to tie into, because one of the subchapters is called the lie of Valhalla. Yep. I don't know how many SEALs will toast to Valhalla, which they don't believe, by the way. They're lying, and they go, we'll see you in Valhalla, brother. And you can believe that? They're like, no. But they don't have the balls to say heaven. Yes. Or Jesus or anything, and you find out they are believers, and you find out you didn't do a service there, you did a disservice, right? Yeah. We're gonna toast to a dead buddy with a lie, and I'm not anti-SEAL either, man. I love that brotherhood, about the strong parts in it. I want to highlight, right? But I think it's time to put the childish stuff behind us, right? I don't know how many times we talked about Yellowstone. I don't know if we're going to be in the book or not, but that Yellowstone thing, I'm watching it again. Yeah. And I'm dissecting it. Certain things call to me. There's truths this big, they cover them with garbage, and we eat it. We're like, oh, this is awesome. I eat it up. This is so awesome, right? And it's like, no, it's not actually. This is a lot. You don't want to be John Dutton. You definitely want to be Rip, and you don't want to date Beth. If you've ever dated crazy, you want no part of that, right? But you're like, that's awesome, man, laying in the bushes or whatever, laying off in a field, talking to Beth and doing all that stuff. Dude, you don't want to be there ever, right? But it looks cool. Yes. It's sexy. It's like, hey, it's cowboy and all that stuff. Man, I've dabbled in that world, and I learned I like the idea of cows. I like the idea of horses, right? I hope you have them. I'll borrow them, and I'm out, right? I'm going to go ride a motorcycle, and you go feed your cows. But it is something calling to me. So the pieces in that are true are very true, but it's 10%, right? Yeah. But if you're watching Yellowstone thinking that's a manual on how to be a man, good luck with you. Because you're going to be a train wreck in about 10 minutes.
Oh, no doubt. I think that's the other thing, too, that comes to mind is, as a man, I think we're always looking for that checklist. Yeah. And that's one thing I've loved about this book so far is it's not this chapter 1, do this, chapter 2, do this, because every man is looking for the easy way out. Which is why I think, even to our point here a minute ago of their identity is, what can I tangibly put my hands to and earn for myself? Yeah. That's the easy way, 100%. Yeah. But the actual hard part is actually, as Michael Jackson said, looking at the man in the mirror and saying, what do I have to change?
Yeah, it starts right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called accountability. It's out of fashion. That's still the answer, right? And like even the chapter, I think I put it on there, subchapter on was it fitness? I think it was called fitness. Yes. It was going to be eat right, ... exercise. It's always been that. It's always, turn the page. There's nothing else to say. Eat right and exercise. And just like Dave Ramsey on the money thing, it's like, there's nothing wrong with it. Just do it, right? It's same thing with, was it G.K. Chesterton, I believe, that talks about Christianity has never been proven wrong. It's just been proven difficult and left untried. People say, this is rough, I'm out. Exactly. And then they blame God when things go sideways. Exactly. Okay, you can do whatever you want. You just didn't trust the thing, right? The thing, by the way, that built the greatest nation on the planet Earth and has helped more people than anything ever, that Christian experiment, if you will, of America is amazing. And the thing that built it, you're ready to throw it out. Yeah. Okay, and you can. Yeah. You know, but if that truly is, like that success leaves clues, if that's the thing that got us here, it is the thing that can save us. Returning to Christ, having godly men. We talk about right equals righteous, good equals godly. Yes. That was the definition. Pull out the 1828 dictionary, the Webster's Dictionary, and see. Most of these definitions talked about God and the Bible and all that stuff, and right means righteous. Yeah. It doesn't mean, well, I can be right, you can be right, you can't. That's not true. And good, goodbye, God be with ye. Like, this was the vernacular back then, and everybody, even in my generation, my parents' generation, there was an ethical right and wrong. Yes. Anything I've ever done wrong in my life, which is a bunch, by the way, I knew it was wrong. Yeah. I just did it anyway, right? Because I was young, I was just full of it and whatever, but I did it anyway, and then I had to deal with those consequences, right? And again, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go back and change it because it made this guy sitting right here, but it just means that if that is the recipe of right equals righteous, good equals godly, it means it's time to open the Bible, know it better, start applying these things in my life. And over time, I've never seen it go bad ever. No. Things Jimmy said that was Jimmy, I've had to eat crow, man. But things I spoke that were truths from the Bible, they've never, ever, ever betrayed me. No. Not once ever. No. How can we throw that out? Yeah. I think the only answer to that is the fact that we have to be okay with understanding there's guardrails. Yeah. And the guardrails on the road nobody's driving around saying, man, I really hate that guardrail, the fact that it saved my life. Yeah. But we've applied that to every other area of our life. Right. And I think that's why Scripture, and we look at that particular version of the dictionary, is getting thrown out, because it's something that's saying, here's what's right and here's what's wrong. Yeah. And this world says, I don't want to know what's right, what's wrong. I want to do what I want to do, and you stay out of my way. Yeah. And then they complain about it when it comes back to bite them in the butt. Yeah, we talk about forgiving our forefathers, right? Forgiving our fathers. We talk about our forefathers, and we say there is a treasure map, if you will, in each of our lives, and it says this was bad, this was bad, this was good, this was bad, this was good, and it's true. It's history. It's his story, right? So it's this road, and if something in my past can help you, then man, you don't have to make that mistake. Whether it be it wasn't my alcoholism, or it was this, or it was that, or it was divorce, or whatever. And if you can look at that, because I've earned your trust, and you go, you know what, that cost Jimmy 3 years of moving forward, I'm going to pass. Yeah. As long as we leave it intact. We don't try to sugarcoat it. And we say, this is as true as it gets, brother. Yeah. This was bad, real bad. I almost didn't make it back. And you go, you know what, I'm not going down that road. I'm going to keep going. And you keep moving forward. That's good. But what we're doing right now is we're trying to judge our forefathers as if they were standing here, judge our literal dads at 35 years old. Doesn't matter if they're now 70 and they're better men. I'm trying to judge them as if they're 35, which means there can be no victory, and I'm just mad. Fighting a war I can't win. Okay, you can do that. It's going to be divisive, and you're going to stop moving forward while you do that. You know?
You're going to waste however long you choose to fight that battle.
Not to mention the guilt once they pass, and you pull your head out and you go, what was I thinking, right? So now all of a sudden, all that's doing is destroying men at an alarming rate with suicide, with just knuckleheads calling it good, with all that stuff, and it's getting worse. So our kids knowing how to understand what is true, because that truth with a capital T, we've talked about that a bunch, is if that truly is at the heart of this, how are they going to know it if we don't teach them? And then the earlier today I was talking about that too, is you can say whatever you want. If you don't model it, not only, pretty sharp guy, I wouldn't say I'm the brightest, sharpest tool in the shed, but at high school, man, these aren't fools. There's a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid watching you. If you lose credibility by not modeling it, you're not genuine, and I'm done with you. Right? And now you caused him to go another way because you betrayed him. You say this, but you do this. You say this, but you do this. Now there's grace, obviously, because I'm not perfect. And then me even saying, listen, I'm not perfect, guys. I'm trying to do this. I tell my kids this. Just another guy trying to make it from breakfast to dinner. But man, I'm so much closer to the guy that God called me to be than I was at 28. Right? And I'm not done. And I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to ask for their grace when I mess things up as being a dad, as being a husband, and all that kind of stuff. But when you get your head up and you see something true and you head that way, I can't even explain how rewarding that is, because it just feels genuine. It feels true. And then you pop your head up and look back, because we don't do that either. We start working, and you pop your head up and you're like, man, this is pretty good. I told Rachel the other day, and I didn't expect to talk about this. I don't know if it's prayer time or men's group or something like that. I walked in, I go, you know what? Because we're weird. She gets awkward when we talk like heart to heart. I go, hey, can I say something? You don't have to respond. Can I just say something real quick? And I go, if you changed absolutely nothing about you for the rest of our lives, it would still be a good deal for me. She goes, thank you. And I just walked away because don't think and talk again. Just go, right? Just drop it and just roll out, right? Because it really was from the heart, because I feel like she thinks I'm trying to change her, and I'm not. But I've kind of made that bed, so I got to find my way out of it. But then I just felt like that's she needed to hear that. I needed to say that, and let's just move forward in a good way. Because it is true, man. It's like, we get so comfortable, we got nothing to complain about, so we invent stuff. I don't have a bad deal. I've got a wife that loves me. Of course it's not perfect, and of course I'm speaking in, when I'm saying blue, she's here in pink, whatever you want to call it. But I don't want my kids having to sort through that stuff. So if you take a step back and you go, man, from 30,000 feet, this is a straight good deal. In anybody's book. Quit your whining, you know? And we need that every once in a while, because we're so close we can't see it. Man. I've told you, it's like, you know how good I'd be at squaring away your finances? Not mine, yours, right? I could write it down and square you away pretty quick and be like, just do the thing. When they're mine, I'm not going to show you my balance, whatever. But it's too close to see it, right?
Well, it's that gratitude. It's that, I think one of the conversations we had probably 2 months ago was this idea of coming home from work and seeing all the shoes on the garage door steps. And your first inclination was, this is so frustrating. Why don't they just take their shoes, put them in the closets and in their bedrooms, upstairs, out of the space? Then you stopped and said, wait a minute. In 15 years, there won't be any shoes left here on this doorstep.
Some couples have zero shoes. It's just their perfect shoes over there, right? And I think about that all the time now, because once we said it out loud, and I talked about that, I come home literally like my foot is a rake or something, and I just kick shoes out of the way. There's a pack, and I giggle. It's none of that. I'm just like, these kids, and just kicking them out. I'm like, how do you have so many, by the way? And my daughter, I'm like the little one, whoosh, because she's the princess, man. She's just like, whatever, dad, shoes, whatever. And it's adorable, and I do. And now I pay attention to them more, because we voiced it between just two guys having a conversation, and it does sting a little bit. I'm like, these shoes are getting bigger, man. Like now, Becca borrows her mom's jackets and all that stuff. I'm like, man, there's a expiration date on this, and it's starting to sting in a good way, right? But it's just it's good. It's good stuff. But I appreciate these moments, and in prayer I tell them every second I appreciate. Every second with you I appreciate, just because this revelation from God saying, hey man, they're not going to, those shoes aren't going to be stacked here forever.
No.
And now it is. Gratitude just overwhelms you. Yeah. And now it's like a game. Kick them out of the way so I'll roll my ankle going in or out, right?
Oh, that's good.
What else on the, any chapters come to mind talking about, while we're on that subject? Because you'll ask me, this is what our regular conversations look like. Actually, I'll give you a minute to think about that if something grabbed you. And you can look at the list because I pulled them up. But also, technology, what this process looks like, because I'm so scatterbrained. I will never say, I don't even know that I can even say I wrote a book. I spoke a book, right? Because you're like, it started a long time ago and Steve was helping with this and it was just this amazing thing where I could put a microphone on me and go spend time with God and talk, right? And now there's apps, there's software that can take all that for very inexpensive, it's very efficient, and now it transcribes it. And Temi is the one we use, T-E-M-I. And as I speak it, you'll hear my voice and their best guess. Yep. So if you follow it and listen and watch, if I say a word and it's wrong, you just correct it, right? Very, very efficient. Yeah. Now that talking point's done, put it in the hopper, right? And then go again, next point, next point, next point. This is where this book thing would end until you get an organized person, right? And then they go, okay, you made a huge mess, sometimes redundant times 50,000, and now we got to somehow make this legible so people are like, this guy's a crazy person, right? So if you take all that stuff and what we've done is we have a checklist of talking points. We call them subtitles, but talking points. Then the chapters identify themselves, so now you group them, and then it may end up being very few chapters with a ton of subchapters.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Right.
Right on. I mean, so when we first started this, I remember getting the folder from Steve and going through all of the audio files and okay, we got a good start here. And then our first couple meetings was kind of like, okay, let's flesh these out. And there were several meetings where I would just read a subheading or a sentence and say, explain what this means to me. Flesh this out. What's the first word that comes to mind? What were you thinking when you said this? And not in a condescending way, but let me get inside your mind. And we would flesh that out. And I shared earlier, I would spend hours listening to the Protect Culture podcast, watching YouTube videos.
Like all of them, multiple times.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of, they have been listened to. All of that to kind of, almost in a way, a character study, to get to understand, okay, what are the things that Jimmy is passionate about? Yeah. What are the things that always come up? Doesn't matter what podcast it is, what is it? And you mentioned earlier, it's this idea of sowing value into others. Everything you do, every decision you make is with that premise in mind. How can I add value to others?
Appreciate that.
And so, of course, so every chapter just starting to flesh that out. And then we eventually got to the first manuscript. And eventually we got to a phase where it was, okay, we've got all of these subtitles and chapters. Let's remove all the subtitles and chapters and just have sections and flesh those sections out. And that's kind of where we're at right now is this, let's just kind of finesse each and every section. Now, instead of us having I think we're about 300 pages into the book, let's bring it into small paragraphs that we can easily say, okay, that's good, let's check it off, move to the next one. Okay, that one's good, check it off, move to the next one. And the next phase is really push it into the publisher's hands, is being able to take all of that, compile it down, get rid of what's extra, what's unnecessary, and make it into a readable book. But man,
do you think quarter one?
Weird. Because
I underestimated this so big time, right? So I went and made a bunch of messes and all that stuff, and I've gone over it. Now I got to change some things, and now we're back to this phase. We've got so much content. I thought 6 months, maybe a year. I think we're I don't know. It feels like quarter one, 23.
Yeah, I would say for sure.
At least to send it to the editor to get feedback, right? To start that deal and then make the decision if they want to cut it out and make it not Jimmy or make it less Christian. We say, peace out. And then we go find somebody else, right? Because I think that I will tell the message that I feel led to tell. Yes. I feel like that God is speaking through me and saying, what are the lessons in Jimmy Graham's story that may add value to your life? Yeah. So if they want to change that too much, then move on, right? And now there's people, there's Jocko, there's Daily Wire, there's Dan Bongino, there's what's the big one? Anyways, Westbow Press that leads you to Zondervan. Yeah. There's all these options. It's almost too much. But you've walked this before. Yes. So I believe it's now we submit something to an editor. Yeah. They like it earlier than later, so they can come back and say, see what this may help here, make suggestions, and then we go back and forth a couple times. Yeah. How's it work from there?
Yeah. So next process really is, like I said, is getting it back to actual manuscript, something you can compile, send off to an editor, and say, all right, here's what I've got going on. Yeah. The publisher will then look at that and say, is this a genre we work within? Is this something we want to put our name on? And they will either agree to that or not. And something you hit on earlier, which I've truly appreciated about the process, is there are a lot of publishers who will say, if I'm putting my name on this, then I'm going to tweak and add what I want to add. Yeah. I'm going to remove this story because it's too much. I'm going to add this in because this sounds more like us. And I love the fact that you want to protect the work you're putting into this and really the vision that God put on your heart. Once the publisher agrees to that, it begins the round table. It basically send a manuscript, they send us back the edits, go through, flesh it out. And I would say that is probably the most hectic time at the publisher, because that's them getting everything finessed and fine-tuned. And then the fun begins of getting to choose the cover, getting to choose the layout, the design, where you want it distributed, how you want it distributed. And then from there, it's just a roller coaster. So, I mean,
it's what we do. Whatever, man. Call that Tuesday,
I would say for sure, here, I'll say this. Timeline just depends on when you're ready to say, I'm done working on this book.
So 5 years?
Otherwise, we'll just keep going.
Yeah, and I do feel like an urgency coming up just because, and I know it's not going to get any better as far as one of the things that we just talked about. That's in one of the chapters is, as that lampstand's removed and it gets dimmer and dimmer, certain people's light are going to shine brighter. Yeah. It's not like they're doing extra. It's now you notice them.
Yes.
You're like, wow, you got the Jack Hibbs, you got the Jeff Swords you got the Tyler Weinischke, and you're like, I always knew he was a good dude, but now as the lampstand's moved and things are just like, because it's going bad. The trajectory, I know will argue that it's, no, it's getting great. It's going worse and worse and worse, unsustainable, we like to say. Now you start noticing safe places where you can stand, safe places where you can grow. Like, man, I want to be around this person. I'm not sure why. Yeah. It's like now you can start earning those conversations. Say, let me tell you why. Yeah. Right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not asking permission. As shepherd, that word has been very, very big in my life, obviously, for a little while now. And it means, can I guide? Can I teach? Can I protect? Able means capable. So capable protector, capable guide, capable teacher. And I'm going to lead this, I'm going to model it, and you don't have to follow me, right? Because I'm just following Christ. Yes. And if I tripped and fell over, you'd see his back. And if I'm on the wrong thing, I need you to, whatever. Yeah. And if you surpass me, let me follow you, right? So I think that is just such a big thing that people understand that. They're like, like you said, the SEAL team thing might get you in the door, but if you're full of it, they should show you the back door, like you're out of here or whatever. But really, it just says there's a platform. I love how Tim Tebow says this, is that he goes, all this, baseball, football thing, this is a platform to talk about. You'll get me in the room and I can talk about real things, right? That's exactly what this is for me, right? So to be in there, and it happens to be firearms, it happens to be able shepherd, take care of one another, that whole thing, because guys that do have that, guys and gals that have the protector gene, they come in and say, this feels right, and then I get to say, without this adventure, without doing something with a purpose, you're not firing on all cylinders. You're a percentage of what you could be. Yeah. So what is your calling and your spiritual gifts? Let's find those and work within those. Yeah. And now it feels, at least in my life for right now, I'm more in line with that, and I'm running more efficiently. And it's more rewarding, and it's quite frankly, it's more emotional. Yeah, like it's like I feel like that, that dude, like the dad that you're like, I'm like, it's when I joke with my kids about that stuff, but some stuff grabs me because I see how absolutely beautiful it is. Yeah, right. I didn't see that before. I didn't take time to see what those moments were, and I'm starting to get it. Yeah, and I'm starting to see why the dad giving the daughter away just can't even keep it together, right? Blathering, whatever, because it's so good. And back to Jordan Peterson saying, it's not that, it's amazing that we're not killing each other all day, every day. Right? It's an actual miracle that people can be so self-controlled because we're bent towards that direction, right? To go to lie, cheat, steal, get everything you can, dog eat dog as long as you make more money. Yep. We're bent that way after the fall, and people are doing that at alarming rates. So it does take effort. And in the book we call it any forward gear. If you're not in any forward gear, as long as you're moving forward, doesn't mean don't rest. By the way, because that quote's in there. No. Yes. In Resting Died. It doesn't mean don't rest. It says don't make a life resting. Yeah. It means rest. That's not weakness, by the way. That's strength. And back to that other interview I was discussing earlier. But I want my boy to show emotion, and I want him to spend more time with family, and I want him to be like, that's not weakness. Yeah. That's strength. Yeah. So weakness is not even a possibility. I'm not in the business of weakness, period. I'm in the business of redefining strength. Like redefine strength. That's what Man 2.0 means to me. You don't tell me what a man's man is. I'll tell you, right? Yeah. And it's going to be in line with Scripture because I was designed this way. And if you don't like it, that's okay. get out of my way because I'm going to go save this earth, right? And I tell my kids this, not our job to save the nation. It's not our job to save the world. That's already been done. It's our job to try, right? We're made to move the needle towards good. And it's not because Jimmy saved anybody. No. It's because he was called to do a thing and he did it and he didn't ask permission. And I believe that glorifies God.
Yeah, no, amen to that. And I think so much of, you kind of hit on the head a minute ago, is this idea of, I think you probably spent the first 30 years of your life paving a way forward and looking back and saying, where's the work I'm doing?
Yeah.
What's left behind me?
Yeah.
And sadly, part was left behind you. And I think there's truth to this, and just hearing some of the stories you've talked about in the chapter of Earning Courageous Communications.
Yeah.
Is this section of the book where you distinctly recall a friend from the SEAL teams being deployed, his wife calling you saying, hey, can you just come take my daughter home? And you asking yourself, why did you call me? You know I'm the guy your husband always talked about at the bar who can't control his liquor, can't control his language. Why did you call me? And recognizing that she saw something in you before you even saw it.
Yeah.
And now you've entered into a phase of your life where you're able to, when you can, put your head above water and look back and say, man, look at what the work I am doing.
Yeah.
This is the way I want to go. It's not been easy, and you've shared that, but it's a path that's been rewarding, and a path that I think I have no doubt that anybody who's part of the Able Shepherd community can see, and your children are witnessing firsthand.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a big deal, because like you don't understand the compliment that's buried under, I'm at the hospital, my daughter's sick, and we've been here for 2 days. I need somebody to come take her home. Mike's deployed, and he said, call you if there's needed. I'm done. I got 0 options. We got no family here, right? Can you come get my young daughter, take her home and cleaned up and in her pajamas, and then put her to bed and watch over her, right? You don't understand that compliment unless you're dead. Until you have a daughter in particular, you don't understand the layers of that. Like, to have, how many people would you call to come? I now think about my Rebecca, Sarah, and Eden, right? Even Christian. Would someone call you with that level of trust, right? Like I'd call you. I have no problem calling you. Hey, brother, I'm in a spot, man. And I don't like asking favors of anybody, right? But I'd be like, not a favor either. It's like, man, I'm in need right now. And many people would say, why didn't you call me? It's like, I don't like calling people, right? And that's a thing that I need to get over, right? Saying, I'm in a spot, please help me. What it says is, I trust you with my young daughter all night long. And I sat there like anxiety-ridden watching Troy. Remember, I think I put a VHS tape in and watched Troy, and if I heard her cough, I ran in because I thought she was dying on my watch, right? So I'm like, she okay? Okay, I think she's choking. She's not choking, she's good. And I go watch it. I go, well, I heard something. And I'm an idiot. I'm running back. I never had kids, and being that guy at the bar and punching people in the face and drinking and doing all that kind of stuff. I'm like, why did you pick me? And then several guys have validated me in that regard, saying, brother, do you realize we were watching you? You seem to have an ethical right and wrong. I'm like, man, if you're following me, you're train wreck. We were train wrecks, man. We didn't know you seemed to have some kind of thing you were following. I'm like, man, I didn't feel that way. I felt like I was just as reckless or out of control as you guys. But I have had men that I respect saying, no, we were, if you were bad, we were worse, and we were looking to see what you did. And that's again a heavy responsibility. And that's the truth, by the way. We're all teachers and leaders. It's in the book. We're all teachers and leaders. We're teaching people right or wrong. We're leading them to heaven or hell. You don't have to like it. Nope. Now, whether they follow you or not, it's another thing, but you are. That's just the way we live. So if you're out putting out bad gouge and you're leading people, and then you finally arrive at the gates of hell, Jimmy, what are we doing here? The true answer is, I led you here. And that could be your family, that can be your friends, that can be everybody. So once you understand that and you take that challenge, you go, you know what, I don't work for you. Is the enemy Satan? I don't work for you. I never have, and we're changing things this day. Right? And then you start a better path. You feel it in your bones. I can't say this loud enough. You feel it while it's happening. Not look back, God did some stuff back then. You feel it day of. You go, this was a good day today. I honored God, I did this, and I didn't lead him in the wrong direction, right? And that part of that honor is mine when I hand that glory back to God.
Absolutely.
What else, brother? We're just going to close with one more.
Oh, you're good.
I think, are we coming up on 20 minutes, BK? It's funny, the data says, hey, 20-minute podcasts are where you aim. So the joke is, hey, what do you think, in 20 minutes? And it's like an hour and 20, like all the time, over an hour. So,
man, I don't know. I mean, I think
we've touched on many.
Yeah, I think the one thing that comes to mind, and you guys can't see this subtitles checklist, but
there's a lot.
I was thinking about on the way over, and this isn't just me saying because we're recording and there's a camera, but what has been so incredible to watch in this, and my wife tells me all the time, and I'm amazed at the position that I'm in of being able to be so quickly involved in your life and get to hear these stories, and including being a part of that men's small group on Fridays, and not just hearing words, but truly seeing there is weight to these words. And just looking through this list, and I'll read some of them off of, am I the problem? Any forward gear? Blessings journal. Core values, honor, integrity, accountability, faithfulness, finding your feet, fruit of the Spirit as goals, goodness, gratitude, His story, honor and glory. Is it sustainable? Just a small cut. These are all just subchapters, but every one of them it rings of what God is doing in your life and the position you are in, and just the honor I feel of being a small part of this process of being able to say, this is a man I will follow. And yes, I mean God, but in this season, you being in my life is an opportunity for me to say, as an early father, this is a man I can look up to and lead in his footsteps with. And it's been a true privilege to watch, not just you desiring to have a book written, but truly the weight of understanding that your words carry weight, and that this book, whatever it comes out to be, you want every sentence, every word, every page to be authentically you, and ultimately it's pointing back to the King of Kings. It's not about Jimmy Graham. It's not about Abel Shepherd. Yeah, I'm sure there, as you said earlier, there will be a reward that comes of that, because people will realize this man and this program I'm involved with, this community I'm involved with, it's not just a community. It's infectious. It's one of the first stories you shared with me of somebody coming to their first class and you standing in the parking lot after 2.5 hours after class ended and them saying, can I just come take out the trash? Because there's something here that I want to be a part of.
That's that guy right there. It was BK. Did you know that?
I was going to make a guess. But I'm going to tell this story without mentioning the name, just in case.
Just in case.
But I think that is so what I see. Even Friday night at the party, of just like, it is so clear to everyone around you, whether they can put words on it or not.
Yeah.
There is something in this community that is almost undefinable, but you know you're in the right place.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that so much, because that's exactly to our point. Is all it is. It's a guy trying his best to live the characteristics of Christ as he understands them. That's it, right? Yeah. And then if you earn trust by not, obviously, screwing people over or whatever, or violating that trust, then you earn the conversation to explain that, right? And one of the things we talk about is what was said, who said it, how'd they say it, right? So to be able to just be genuine and be honest and say, guys, I don't have this figured out. Now, I've learned some things, and if I can help you and I can help you protect your kids and all this other stuff, but that's usually not what the conversations are about, right? It's that got them in the door, right? Oh, guns are cool. That's so funny to me that people come thinking they're going to learn about guns, right? And then next thing you know, we're in Montana or we're in Wyoming and we're on a BDR and my son's there, and now there's a video and a movie and whatever. So all this stuff is just unbelievably amazing because a guy just tried to honor God with his life, right? And I mess up, I don't even know how many times a day, right? But I'm trying, right? And it is, if you're adding value to other people, it becomes this thing, and we've said this too. When you add value to others, then twice that comes back on you, right? Not because you want to. It's not a prosperity gospel thing, just saying, and then I get a bunch of stuff. It's like, no, I get to live it. I get more out of this than anybody, and I didn't count on that. And I came to serve, and I realized, man, I've learned so much about my marriage by leading risers. So Risers Men's Marriage Muster. I felt because there was some need in the community, and I said, hey, if I started a marriage group, would you come? And they come, and I've got more out than anybody, right? And some people are doing great, some people not so good, some people hanging tough, whatever. But it just means we honestly, and we've never, and I love this about this job, about Risers, about all of it, we've never dishonored anybody's spouse, ever. Like even with the staff, I'm like, man, I don't want to, and we don't go down that road. It's like, I want to allow it. Like, I don't want to hear it, right? If it's something that we're honest and we're sharing, we've done that. But I'll never be dishonoring to Rachel. It'll never be dishonoring to Everett. It'll never be dishonoring to Kara, ever, right? Because we don't allow it. We don't let that in. And that's a healthy environment, because I've heard, and I've been, obviously this is my only job, in environments where it's not that. And every day may equal to divorce, just because there was not truth spoken ever. And then you started buying it, and now your kids are going to pay for it, right? So that's something that I really appreciate about my staff, this group, and all that stuff. And I believe the only way that obviously God will remove his lampstand from what we're doing is if I compromise my integrity.
Yeah.
And I've told the staff this. It used to be, hey, Jimmy, so-and-so is asking, this business is asking if you'll do this. And at first I would say, obviously I'm not. And then I said, don't ask me again. Yeah. If it's unethical, you have the authority to say this will never happen ever.
Yes.
Never here.
Yes.
Right? So don't even ask me again. Or that's no longer a client, right? That kind of thing. So now that sticks to their skin. And now they go into their, and they go, you know what, we don't do that ever. And then I hear them correcting people, and I hear them shutting people down, and I hear that, and it's contagious.
That's good.
Cool.
That's good.
All right, I appreciate you, brother. Yes. Thank you. I really wanted to just sit you down and find out how you haven't gone crazy yet, trying to make sense of all this. But I truly think that there's going to be fruit, that this will be blessed. And sometimes I wish this wasn't so heavy of a burden. For example, when I say it's not French, it's bad English. It comes from there was a coach.
Yes.
And you know this, in the SEAL teams that they bring in, his name was Dr. Fowl. I'm sure he's not around anymore because he was an older gentleman then. Yeah. But this was a long, long time ago. But one of the team guys threw off an F-bomb, and he goes, pardon my French. And he looked at him and he goes, it's not French, it's bad English. And the room just froze. And I'm like, I kind of dig this guy, And back then I was worse than probably any of them, right? But I was just like, there's something to what he just said. He just said something true, and the time stood still. Yep. And he was like, you can choose better words. It's a lost, and that is lost opportunity cost. Yes. And you'll never be able to measure the lost opportunities because you couldn't speak like an adult, right? So it's just heavy on me, and everybody that knows me knows that. Sometimes I wish I could let it go. But no, I'll carry that.
No
right
need
on.
to.
Send me.
Yes.
Isaiah 6:8.
Yes.
So thank you very much, brother.
Yes.
Let's go. Final thoughts.
Final
he prepped
thoughts.
you. BK warned you that I was going to put you on the spot.
I'll take it. Final thoughts would be just...
Oh, into this camera, BK?
Into that camera? Okay, looking at you. Final thoughts would be any of you guys who can truly attest to just what we're talking about in this book, this idea of your character and your words carrying weight. In a season where I think gratitude comes in abundance, pass it on. I say, if anything, when this book is released, my only hope is that people actually take it and apply it. It's not just another book. It's on a bookshelf. It's not just something where you read it and say that was great and you move on, but truly it's a book that surpasses time. A book where you are constantly coming back to it saying, man, this is an area that I need to work on. It's a book that I think covers a lot of categories as men and areas in our life that we have to work on. And I'm hoping that as you read through the chapters, that you see your heart come across in the book, but also this desire of not just reading something again saying it's good, but saying, how can I be better in this?
Awesome. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Hope is that we could hand it to a young man that's going through that rite of passage, the 13, going off to the military at 18, or a guy at 60-something saying, I just read this, it changed my life, and he hands it to his grandson. So I hope that we can pull that off. And I believe we will, so I can't thank you enough.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Cheers, my brother. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, want to give a shout out again to able-nation.org. Neil Pinkham, the Sage down in Louisiana, he's still running that from Louisiana to help out with scholarships, with medical supplies, anything that can add value to security and taking care of the loved one. Protecting those in your care is the way we say it. But we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks again to my guest, Tyler Weinischke, 051, Abel Shepherd, BK in the house. Thank you. Jim Clemenson just stepped in the room from Indiana. So thank you guys so much for checking in with us. Till we see you again on the next podcast, God bless each and every one of you. Take care of one another.